and welcome to Perspective. Consistent with Pakistan's efforts for a peaceful Afghanistan and inclusive government in Afghanistan is the Foreign Minister's recent visit to Afghanistan. His talks with the Taliban as far as the situation on the Chaman border is concerned, the fact that it's been closed for more than 2 weeks, what headway has been made with regard to that as far as the talks with Taliban leadership is concerned. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the international engagement which Pakistan has been advocating for. We've also, as far as the Foreign Minister is concerned, the Prime Minister is concerned, we've been urging the international community to do what they can to help Afghanistan in terms of humanitarian assistance, aid, all of that. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, who's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Tariq Farhadi, who is a foreign affairs expert. Thank you for being with us. Zafar Sahab, like I said, this recent visit is also, it's the first visit after the Taliban takeover. What do you see as the ramifications of this visit? What do you think, what kind of headway? We've seen some concessions as far as transport is concerned, all of those issues that we've been having on the Chaman border. There were talks on that also. How do you expect this to turn out?
I think that, as you have already mentioned, the continuity of Pakistan's efforts.
Right.
It's a part of the continuity of Pakistan efforts that how you can bring the Taliban in the mainstream of the international politics as a Taliban as a representative government or as a government of Afghanistan. When we focus on it, of course, Pakistan needs a stable Afghanistan, but at the same time, Afghanistan is a market of us and we are a market for the Afghanistan products as well. If you see a lot of flow is from there, and as the Foreign Minister yesterday when landed in Afghanistan with him, they were either heads of the departments or from the different ministries. It was a big delegation. And it is correct to say that it is first time a mega, or you can say rare delegation went there with a purpose. Purpose was how to facilitate the trade between the two countries and what we can do for them and what we are desiring for it and what they are desiring. And I think it was also reported that sooner their delegation will be also coming. So if you see that since 15th August, there was sometimes opening, closing, no proper working, but now I think it's a mode of operandi which both the governments will be going to follow to facilitate the trade, people transportation or communication between the two countries. It's good for Pakistan and more important for Taliban, and at the same time we have to take into account at the background of Moscow meeting where Pakistan again pleaded that we have to stabilize Afghanistan, we have to assist the Taliban government in the humanitarian, in the economic field. Otherwise, what the Prime Minister mentioned, that if there is a meltdown, economic meltdown in Afghanistan, everyone will suffer, but Pakistan will be the bigger.
On that note, we'll be taking a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Let me go to Tariq Farhadi. Tariq, we've just, of course, the Foreign Minister also said that 5 billion rupees humanitarian assistance Pakistan has committed for Afghanistan also. In terms of the talks that were held between the foreign ministers of both countries, how do you see this in terms of our progression of our relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Well, greetings. It is very desirable for both countries to have the best relationship. The problem here, if you look at it from outside the region, outside of the South Asia region, the Taliban regime, as it is right now, might turn into a liability for Pakistan. If it is not recognized by the United Nations, if it is not recognized by the world, it loses a considerable amount of international aid that Afghanistan could have and should have garnered itself. Pakistan shouldn't have to give humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. The Western donors are ready to give the humanitarian aid to Afghanistan.
Right.
And but the government needs to reform itself. If it doesn't, basically Pakistan will end up with a neighbor where all kinds of problems will spring up, and all kinds of humanitarian need that Pakistan could provide will not fix this problem. It is much better for Afghanistan to be a recognized country on the world level, to receive its own humanitarian aid, its own IMF and World Bank support, and be a good trading partner and a good political neighbor for Pakistan, and that's all desirable, yes.
Right, right. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Zafar Saab. Zafar Saab, what about the Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia also? You know, in terms of the Taliban and Saudi Arabia, the relationship that they've had historically, do you think that the Prime Minister Pakistan will be able to act, as a sort of intermediary between Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan also?
I think that if you recall, Taliban and the Saudi Arabia's relations disturbed even prior to 9/11, and after that disruption of mandate. But we have seen that after the withdrawal of the American forces from Afghanistan, and the way we have seen that now Taliban are there, naturally, whether you like the Taliban or not, but Taliban is not reality. It is a government in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is now referred by it. And naturally, Saudis have an interest in this region, and they definitely desire that they have some kind of contact with the Taliban. We have to also not forget, because if you see that the Saudis are facing a problem in the Yemen, and in the Yemen, which there is a Shati community which is posing a challenge to them, and when they go for the Fatimian Brigade or Zainabian Brigade, all these have some kind of component which move from the Middle East to go to Afghanistan and these kind of things. Definitely it is in the security interest of Saudi Arabia to have a contact with them. Now, your second part of your question was about that whether Prime Minister will be successful. My understanding is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan definitely articulate his narrative or share his point of view about the Taliban government for the sake of economic or humanitarian assistance. And Saudi's assistance makes a difference if they are willing. But we have to wait and see. But I am convinced that the Prime Minister Imran Khan definitely going to request them, or you can say, as he is presenting this case, that the international, it's the responsibility of the international community to engage the Taliban, to assist the Afghans in this crisis. And definitely same thing he will be going to talk with the Saudis.
In terms of leverage, Tariq, in terms of leverage, of course, the Saudis believe that Pakistan has some leverage with the Afghan Taliban. Do you think that, we've been talking about the relationship historically that they've had with the Taliban, also with the region, if we look at Qatar, Palestine, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, all Iran, all of those, they would probably at this time want to have that kind of relationship with Afghanistan, which is what Zafar Saab is also saying.
Yes, Saudi Arabia is a very important country in the Arab world and in the Gulf region. First of all, for both Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's a very large export market for food items and our fruits in the region, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. Saudi Arabia is a consumer market, and it's a wealthy market. Also, Saudi Arabia has all our workers working there and sending remittances. This is very important as well. Whether they would like to send messages through the Prime Minister of Pakistan to the Taliban, it would be a good idea, but at the same time, the problem here is that Islamic countries do not want to recognize the Taliban regime as it is, because they have asked the women to stay home. If they recognize the Taliban regime as it is, it gives really a bad image in the world. The Islamic countries have invested over the last 3 decades worldwide For a modern Islam, where the woman works outside, has jobs, makes progress in the government. Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was a prime minister in Pakistan. So we cannot ask the woman to stay home, and the Taliban are doing that right now. For any Islamic country to recognize the Taliban without reforms made in Kabul, it would be the wrong signal to the world about Islam. MBS is very careful about that, but MBS is trying to project a different image of Islam throughout the world. He's investing big money throughout the world, in the Western world, to convince the Western world that Islam is not what some extreme right people think. So we have to all be careful. The least expensive investment is to convince the Taliban to reform their government.
Right. Let me come back to you. Zafar Saab, I think Tariq he raises a fair point as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, and of course the image of Islam that they want to project to the world, which is what he's talking about. But in terms of Afghanistan particularly, of course they need the clout that Saudi Arabia has with regard to GCC countries also. Saudi Arabia can play a significant part there, and I think Afghan Taliban are cognizant of all of that the reality there, because they need humanitarian assistance. Do you think that maybe the Prime Minister's efforts, our Prime Minister's efforts with regard to this, can bring things to sort of like a middle? With the kind of assistance that Afghan Taliban need, Afghanistan at this time needs, which is what the Prime Minister has been pleading to the world, will make them perhaps accede to having women rights and not, having women stay at home, as Tariq says.
Look, we have to be very clear. First of all, when we talk about the leverage over the Taliban, Pakistan has, but it's a very limited. Pakistan is going to multiply by engaging more.
Right.
For example, bilateral trade or these kind of the things. But we have to not forget here that Taliban's main base camp, that was in Qatar. And during the negotiations, I think between the Americans and Taliban, which took place in the last 2-3 years, at that time Qatar and Saudi's relations were not very good. So in that context, the Taliban had a good relations with Iran as well. Though Iranians are now not as comfortable as we are, not everyone is talking about inclusive government, that's a different debate. So Saudis with the passage of time lost their influence over the Taliban, but definitely they desire being a leader of the Sunni Muslim world or a Muslim entire world, and Taliban are also follower of this, what we call it, Hanfi school of thought, basically going from Sunni. So ideologically, it makes sense, Saudis and the Taliban. But here it's important thing is that Saudis are, or Prince Mohammed is also, you can say, involved in the reforms. He has introduced certain reforms in the recent years, and
unconventional reforms.
Unconventional, yes, we use the very correct unconventional, which was not expected 3-4 years before. Similarly, Taliban are also talking about women's education, women's working, and Taliban realize it. Look, last time when we see, it was continuity of the Mujahideens converted into Taliban. It was coming out of 10 years war and then becoming in the government after 4-5 years. But this time they have seen 20 years. Naturally, they realize that if they have to make their urban life more comfortable, their government more functional, in the hospital, in the schools, in many other sectors, they need the woman. That's why they are saying that they are not against the working of the woman. But of course, we have to also give here, not forget the majority of the Taliban, they were from the ruler side, they were in the battle, and at that time their leaders were saying that we are in a jihad, and they were giving them a different kind of a notion in which hardcore religion were interpreted, though the Islam in which they were interpreting the jihad or these kind of things. Definitely how they overcome that kind of a challenge, it's a big challenge. Now finally is that, of course, my understanding is that Prime Minister of Pakistan will be able to convince the Saudi leadership that they must contribute in the humanitarian activities in Afghanistan, and he will be able to convince them.
What about Saudi Arabia's lobbying power in Washington?
It's very strong. It's very strong, and that is the issue. I think maybe we are able to convince the Saudis, but the Saudis are looking to the Washington. Now, it's a big question mark whether American or Biden administration is serious for the stability in Afghanistan. Because I think 2-3 days back, their special representative, he resigned.
Right.
So it means that the Biden administration is thinking differently. And if I can go with the hardcore realist politics or realpolitik, I think stability in Afghanistan, which is the backyard of the Chinese and the Russians, whom they already declared as an enemy or strategic competitors, I think that is not in the interest of the Americans. And maybe they are not, you can say, convincing the Saudis. But if the Saudis will be jumping in or are prepared to play their role in the Afghanistan stability or economic, you can say, uplifting, certainly they will be having a sanctioning from the Washington.
Right. Tariq, do you agree? You think that Afghanistan's role as far as, America's role will be determined, of course, the domestic situation in America at this time, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, the sentiments that we see there, and also with regard to this bloc as far as Russia, China is concerned, will of course dictate how, whether lobbying by Saudi Arabia will work as far as Taliban is concerned, even if that does happen.
As far as America goes, America has definitely taken a step back from the region.
Right.
It would like to forget about Afghanistan. Really, it has been a bad experience. They have spent a lot of money. They are not happy. We saw this experience being expressed by the two presidents of America, Trump and Biden, which think the same way about Afghanistan. We spent too much money there. We didn't know why we were there the second 10 years. So this feeling of having dealt with a bad investment and now just forgetting about it, this is what it is. They have taken 124,000 or maybe 70,000 Afghans to America. They're very focused on that, actually. The Biden administration has put aside $6.2 billion to facilitate settlement of the 74,000 people they are going to have in America from Afghanistan, but they have only contributed $64 million for humanitarian aid. Saudi Arabia is not going to lobby for the Taliban in America. Again, it's an image issue. Nobody wants to lobby for the Taliban anywhere. If you do lobby, you put yourself in the bad category. I'm saying this, and I'm saying it to the Taliban. I'm in contact with them. We are talking cordially. I'm very active in debates in Kabul. I say, guys, the war is finished. Now it's the economic war, and it's the real politics of the world. You have to change. You have to adapt. You have to make cosmetic changes, even, but you have to adapt if you want to be accepted. Because even Pakistan doesn't want to have a poor and in Afghanistan as a neighbor, because it will create more problems in the future.
So, right. Zafar Saab, do you agree? You think, of course, in terms of image, I think Tariq is right. As far as image is concerned, nobody would want to lobby for Taliban unless things change as far as women's rights are concerned, and those changes are seen, as far as the world can see them. Nobody would want to align. Of course, we've said that they should have humanitarian assistance, there should be inclusive government, all of those things. But unless those changes are made across the board, we won't see a change as far as recognition is concerned, as far as, maybe humanitarian assistance will follow.
I think that we must be very realistic. What they are demanding from the Taliban,
right?
If one cannot be missing the Taliban won the war.
Right.
This is a reality. They had received at least I can say de facto legitimacy when the Americans started negotiations with them. And when they signed an agreement in February 2020, Taliban were recognized. They were signing an agreement with them as a de jure or a de facto, that doesn't make any difference. Now after that, there was probably neither Talibans were expecting, nor we were expecting, nor the Americans were, neither Americans were expecting that the fall of Ghani government sudden. So if they had some kind of a roadmap, that was possible to be materialized if there was an exit started or the Americans exited on 31st May. So everyone missed. So it was a sudden new situation. Now here, the American-led world is now asking the Taliban, the victors, who defeated them in a way, in a very simplest manner, that you can accept this. Now, still we know America has a leverage, economic leverage. But we are here forgetting that there are two other actors, that is China and the United States, that is Russians. I think the Russians and the Chinese are least bothered about the human rights.
Okay.
They are more interested, though they are talking about inclusive government, Russians want there must be some concrete action against the Daesh, Al-Qaeda. Chinese want that there must be concrete actions against the Turkestan, East Turkestan Islamic movement. Our desire is something action against TTP, and in that context, Russians are interested that there must be some Uzbeks and Tajiks in this entire system. Now, these are our realistic demands, but on the other side, where is the limit? The limit is the Taliban's. Their 2 decades survival in the war was because of these organizations. Even if they were living there, they were fighting together for the sake of the Taliban's objective. And now the Taliban's here, we are asking that we recognize you if you get rid of these, your allies. Agreed, they said that we will not permit, our territory will be not used. But at the same time, Taliban's have another checkmate. If you see, the Islamic State is now its activities are increasing, they are becoming more, they are having recruits. They are basically, Taliban Pakistan have been joining. There were dissidents within the Taliban groups, they are joining. There are other groups under the umbrella of the Islamic State they are coming. That is a big challenge. So my understanding here is that we are demanding from the Taliban too much. Now here comes the international community's limitations as well. Taliban is a government. This government, of course, who are suffering, Afghans. Since last 4 decades, Afghans have been suffering. Third important thing is, if I'm not wrong, after 3 months, if the one group has a control in the capital, it qualifies to become a de jure government, whether we recognize it or not. What kind of recognition we are talking? Russians invited, trilateral, Russians, Chinese, Pakistan, Taliban were sitting there. Foreign Minister of Pakistan is leading a big delegation. Yesterday he was there, with him our intel guy, our other departments were there. We were negotiating how to manage the Torkham and Chaman border. So are we dealing this with a de facto or a de jure? What kind of the legitimacy when we sign a trade agreements with them? I think that this is a demand, which is a legitimate demand.
It's largely to do with optics.
Yeah, these are all this pressure and Taliban. We have to understand. If somebody thinks that they are not intelligent or shrewd, they are equally shrewd.
But I think America should have realized by now that they are quite shrewd.
Yeah, they are quite shrewd, they are intelligent, and of course they are the children of the war. And the people who grow in this kind of society, they have a different. But I do understand, and here I agree with my other colleague, friend, that this demand from us, demand from the other, inclusive government, action against these non-state actors or terrorist syndicates, human rights, especially women's education, and these kind of the things. These are, I think, a legitimate demand by the international community as well. And Taliban have to listen it if they have to deal or if they have to need something from the international. But in the international community, if we are limiting, if the international community, which in Pakistan, and we say international community is anything which is United States, led Europe. For us, that is important. But where is the other rest of the world? That is important.
Saurabh, do you agree? I mean, as far as recognition is concerned, are we talking largely optics? Because I think, when Zafar Saab says that with the foreign minister going there, we are seeing the engagement that Taliban, the way that they were invited to us in Moscow format, all of that. In fact, that is in a sense recognition, wouldn't you say?
Yes, let's say for a minute that the world recognized the Taliban regime. De facto, they are a government. The problem in Afghanistan now is an economic problem.
Right.
If the world recognizes the Taliban but is not really excited about dealing with them, it will not help them either. People won't give their money to people they don't like. They will give it to Africa. They will give it to other places. And if the economic crisis becomes more acute in Afghanistan, you in Pakistan will receive more refugees. You will have a neighbor which will produce more security and stability for Pakistan. No one can predict what will happen in Afghanistan if the economic crisis comes to a point where people start moving out of Afghanistan. And who moves out of Afghanistan through these borders? Terrorists, who moves out of it? It's very complicated. Now the Taliban have to manage in a way to not to lose the honeymoon. There is a honeymoon period where if they do the right things, the world will say, okay, we will give you an economic aid, what we used to give you. Remember, the world was giving $8 billion a year to Afghanistan, $4 billion in the budget and $4 billion for the army. All of this money was trickling into the economy. America will stop the $4 billion for the army, but if we can convince the world to take the economic assistance to $4 billion a year at least, and now that there is no corruption in Afghanistan, we would be okay. But if the world is ready to forget about us and worry about Lebanon and worry about Somalia and worry about Syria and places that are closer to Europe that could produce...
You think that it will boil down to the fact that whether the Taliban agree to, give rights to women, education to women, all of those things, that will eventually be, dependent upon whether they do get the aid or not.
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm telling the Taliban. I'm telling them, look, the conditions they have posed in front of you are not so complicated. If you want to a larger government, please choose some people, even people who are not in the power before.
Primarily holding them back, because we've been talking about for a while now about how this is a different Taliban from the older Taliban. This is a different generation. What do you think is holding them back? Do you think there's disagreement within them also on whether they can give those rights to women? Or do you think that things as the way that they're shaping up, that eventually that will have to happen?
Yes, there are fringes of the Taliban. There are fringes of the Taliban who are more conservative. It doesn't have to do much with Islam. They are just conservative the way they think. And the leadership of the Taliban is pretty old. And there has to be somebody within the Taliban who can explain to the rest of the Taliban that we have won the war, quote unquote. The West doesn't accept that has lost the war. It says it left Afghanistan. And then now the war is winning the economy. Now the war is to become a good neighbor for everybody and not produce problems for neighbors. Now the war is to make out of Afghanistan a recognized country in the world, which will be a developing country for a while and will need assistance from abroad and assistance from Europe and from those people who have a lot of money who can assist and not be a country that draws down the rest of the region. You see, the problem is that if Afghanistan goes bad, it draws down the rest of the region. There is a risk. We have to take this from another way, try for these reforms in Afghanistan, so that all the advocacy that we are doing for Afghanistan is viewed positively, not viewed as you are advocating for a regime that doesn't belong to the 21st century.
Right. Zafar Saab, what about China, the role of China, Russia, and this other bloc that keeps we talk about, and of course the Moscow format, Taliban were, like you said, a part of that. What do you think will happen? Do you think that if the Taliban will get assistance from there?
I think that
China has already pledged.
No, I think Chinese have already given them 30 million or something. Afghanistan matters to two countries very much, for Pakistan and for China. China's Belt and Road Initiative needs, if you see the China has a Belt and Road, like a corridor, Central Asian corridor, they have a Pakistan corridor, China-Pakistan economic corridor. So they are looking for the investment in infrastructure. They are talking about 400 billion strategic partnership with Iran, and if there is instability in Afghanistan, Chinese will be very much. And then if you see in the last 2 decades, Chinese had invested a lot in the minerals, in the Afghanistan mines. But the problem with the Chinese is the Chinese are not ready to face any kind of a threat there, like terrorist attack, ISI. But my understanding is the Chinese has a potential. Chinese are willing to invest. Definitely Chinese will invest in Afghanistan on their own terms. And their term is Eastern Turkestan Islamic movement. So how much they deliver or show. Then second is the Chinese are very much worried. If you see from the Uyghur nationality, they are part of the Islamic State as well, and they were part of that. They were fighting in Syria or in those places. So Chinese are very much alarmed about it. So if the Chinese are not jumping in and they are not assisting the Taliban in this economic kind of thing, then the Chinese will be one of the biggest losers. Second, what you said about the Russia, Russians, I think, assist them diplomatically, politically, like they call the Chinese, Pakistanis. Yeah, but Russians don't have much money to provide them assistance. And Russians have lesser interest, except Russians wanted to have stability or something in Afghanistan arrangement, which will not, you can say, damage their soft belly. I mean, the Chechnya, Dagestan, their Russians are facing. Their concern is more there. Apart from that, if we think that Russians have some kind of economic potential to provide them, they don't have. Like us, Pakistan
doesn't have, right.
We can assist, we send the humanitarian assistance, but Pakistan is very limited. But here one point is very important. I think we have to link it with this thing, that international community, especially West, he is very much in a fatigue of humanitarian assistance. We are passing through the COVID, the entire world is passing through and humanitarian assistance. So how much West is willing to provide humanitarian assistance? So Taliban have to also think about it, that they have to move ahead as soon as possible.
But what about the fact that there was talk about there was a proposal about convening a UN-led donor conference to build Afghanistan. Do you think that can translate into a reality?
If the Americans are interested, if they are sincerely participating, then the Japanese will be contributing, then the Europe will be contributing, then it will be a reality. If they are not convinced, then definitely, despite this, the Russians, Chinese, Pakistanis or others they are talking about, but the big donors are there when we talk about development projects.
Mahrukh, what about, do you think that as far as what the sentiment is in the US, which we talked about before also, do you think it can be a reality, what Zafar Saab is saying, the UN-led donor conference, which certainly Afghanistan needs? The assistance, there's no doubt about that, and the world largely agrees on that, whether they're committed to giving it or not.
In the United States, there is no more appetite for Afghanistan. As I mentioned, the United States would like to forget this episode of their history. The Republicans are already attacking Biden for mismanaging the whole thing, leaving the Bagram airport for the Chinese, all kinds of things that they are saying that are precise or imprecise. Building Afghanistan, the world invested billions of dollars in Afghanistan for the last 2 decades. There was so much corruption in Afghanistan that it's impossible to build Afghanistan. So there the world doesn't have the money to build Afghanistan. Nobody will build anybody else's country. The Afghans have to build their own country. They have to create a government that's acceptable player in the international community through abstract donor funding that is not loans. Remember, China is not giving any free money to anybody. It gives loans with big interest rates, and then it doesn't complete projects. So I've seen this in Africa, I've seen this in Sri Lanka. I will not name the other here, but there is no gift in the international community.
If the future looks in the immediate future, if we talk about the next 2-3 months, looks for Afghanistan at this time?
There is a honeymoon period for the Taliban to get it right. If they don't, it goes in the wrong direction. There is instability in Afghanistan, which will be exported to Pakistan, which will be exported to Iran in terms of refugees, and which will be exported to Central Asia. That's the bad scenario. Unfortunately, it's a scenario that's very possible. If the leaders in Kabul are not responsible enough to put a brake on it and turn the ship into a positive direction.
Right, do you agree? You think that if the Taliban, unless they change, what Tariq is saying, unless they change their policy as far as women are concerned, education of women, all of those things, things in the next couple of months can largely deteriorate. The aid that we provided is hardly going to be able to sustain them.
It's nothing. If you talk about sustainability, it was adjusted for a short interval. I do agree with this that yes, Taliban have to change. and quickly they have to change their policy. At the same time, the international community here has also realized their sensitivity as well. Because if we expect that the Taliban are going to ensure the human rights or women's rights or women's you can say freedom as in the West, even these things are not in Pakistan. What is happening in Kashmir?
But
What
we
is
do
happening?
allow them education.
Yeah. So no, but I think that we have a check.
Yes.
If you start questioning, everything is questionable. But the problem with it is that Taliban needs to act faster because winter is approaching in Afghanistan. If if the international community is not going there, maybe the Afghans will be suffer a lot from the winter. But here is another important, this is just an alternative view, which I heard from many people. They say that what they think that are they able to blackmail the Taliban economically or by international pressure? They were in the war since last 4 decades. They were in the crisis. They were in the winter, living in the caves here and there. They were least bothered, of course. If they fail to deliver after maybe 6 months, there will be revolt against their government. This is another thing which our government is trying to convince them. But our Taliban are listening, or are they think that after 6 months they will be facing a crisis? I mean the revolt. But if somebody thinks that they are too much sensitive or alarmed about the miseries of the people, they are already facing these miseries.
For a long time.
Yeah, so that is the thing, and that may be the reason that they are not listening, or they are aware, but they are not listening to the international community as consciously as we expect from them.
But what do they expect? What do you think they expect if they don't listen? Like you said, they don't, in terms of alternatives, they don't really have a lot of alternatives, but you're saying they're not too pushed anyway.
Because here it's becoming a common saying that they are new Taliban, there is X, Y, Z. Agreed, a few members of their cabinet, they were in the, you can say, Qatar, shuttling here and there. The rest are all from the war zone. And people who are coming out of the war zone, if you think that they are too much concerned about the economic stability or something like that, rights and these things, or they are ready to accept, because at the back of mind till today they think that we are victor. So dealing with the victor, whether it is rational or irrational, is difficult. International community must be right.
Before I go to Tariq, Zafar, do you think that generally the hopes that a lot of people had with Taliban, under the tag of this being a different Taliban, are now slowly perhaps fading away, or giving into the reality of what that it might not be so different from the last
I think that people who started saying that and expressing optimistic scenarios, they were wrong.
Okay.
We have to be from the very beginning very much careful, because they are Taliban. They were the warriors. They had a certain alliances, and they are not coming from westernized educated institutions. The westernized elite of the Afghanistan either is now begging to fly or already flew from the Afghanistan. The urban elite, of course, educated urban elite in the last 2 decades, there's a big civil society. I think that is a real pressure for the Taliban, for the women's rights, or for these kind of the things, their awareness, their rightness. But if and maybe that pressure, civil society pressure, will change them. But if somebody is thinking that they are changed, I think this time they are more confident. Last time Pakistan recognized them, and with us UAE and Saudi Arabia. This time Russians are talking with them, Chinese are talking with them, Iranians are talking with them, Pakistanis are talking with them, Americans have already talked with them. So if you are looking at different Taliban, they are different on these lines. Otherwise, you think that they are westernized, educated, democrat. No.
Tariq, do you agree? You think that those hopes perhaps were not, have not been realized? The hopes of this being a different Taliban, the hopes that they would perhaps be more liberal with regard to women, all of those things now are giving into the realism of how, this is Taliban who are largely going to be, like Zafar said, Taliban for the world.
The fringe of the Taliban that has most of the power in Kabul is the Haqqani network, and they have certain views about women emancipation, and that we can't even find in Islam. So we have to reach out to them and talk to them in a brotherly and friendly manner that really this is a group that, because of this group, the entire country might pay a very heavy price in going into poverty and misery, and the region will be put down. Pakistan cannot advocate for something that doesn't make sense in a society. Cannot. If it does, it costs Pakistan much. It has costed Pakistan much. It stays on the tax list. All kinds of trouble comes to Pakistan because the perception in the world is Pakistan loves the Taliban. Okay, not good. We have to change the Taliban. We have to reach out. We have to, even for us, the Afghans, and we are doing that. We are talking to them.
So that's what we've been saying. We're saying that engage with them. Don't, unless you engage with them, which is what you are saying, there's no other alternative. They're a reality now.
Engage with them, but also tell them that time is very short, and that for anybody who engages, whether it's Pakistan or whether it's us, the civil society, it has a cost, because we are criticized and we are also losing our stance in the international community, because we are trying to create something, a good picture out of a bad picture, you see. So the picture has to transform pretty quickly. So that we
that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us. Zafar Nawaz Jaswal Sahab, thank you for joining us. Tariq Farhadi, thank you for being with us. As far as the Taliban is concerned, of course, again and again the Prime Minister has reiterated that inclusiveness of government, there are efforts for there being humanitarian assistance. There is no other option as far as Pakistan is concerned, as far as the world is concerned, since Taliban are very much a reality at this time. The world has to engage with them. There is no other option. The other option of letting them be will perhaps have dire consequences for the region, for the world. Let's hope that the world listens. Let's hope that the US, the Western countries can also recognize that the way they left, the way that this region is as far as the war-torn Afghanistan is also not new. And like we spoke about the fact that for the Taliban, this isn't a new reality. So for them, to get them to perhaps, to give those rights to women, which is what the world wants to talk about, which is what we all want to see, perhaps the world again, I will have to say, will have to engage. On that note, thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.